Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this BSI Live webinar, BIM Asset Management, How to Improve Stakeholder Trust and Deliver More Efficient Asset Management. Today on the panel is Gary Pattison, who is BSI's certification technical expert for BIM and digital construction. Gary also leads the development of certification schemes for BIM and works with a range of stakeholders in the supply chain to ensure that they meet industry requirements. In addition to this, Gary has also studied theoretical physics, so I'll try not to get him started on quantum field theory, as we'll be here for a while. And I am also here to help facilitate your presentation as BSI's UK Media Production Manager.
Thank you, Rob. Hi there. Yes, my name is Gary Pattison. So I just to elaborate on the introduction given by Rob. So I've been involved in the development of our BIM certification schemes. So currently we have two certification schemes against our PAS 1192 Part 2, and we recently launched a Kitemark scheme against PAS 1192 Part 3, which is what I'm talking about today. So I mean. Loosely what I'll be covering today, so I'll be going over some of the contents of PAS 1192 Part 3 and how we've created or how we developed a certification product against this scheme, what the scope of that certification product means, so what organizations have to do in order to gain certification, what evidence we're looking for, what is the assessment methodology we're looking through, so how many days will that be? What type of assessment will that take? What locations will we visit? And as Rob mentioned, I'll be conducting some poll questions, or I'll be passing back to Rob to conduct some poll questions, and then we've allotted some time for a bit of Q&A at the end. Great. Okay, so let's get started. Maybe start with something a bit light. So what is an asset? So what are we actually talking about? So, I mean, in the standard itself, it defines an asset as an item, a thing, or an entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. Now, we see some examples on the left there, and these are all examples of a sensitive asset, as defined by PAS 1192 Part 5. But we need to remember that the asset, with respect to the application of Part 3, is much broader than that. So, it could be infrastructure like a road or a railway network. It could also be a house. It could also be a floor of a building. It could be a section of a road. So there's a really wide definition of what an asset actually means. And of course, part 3, or PAS 1192 Part 3, defines how BIM Level 2 is applied against the asset management phase of the asset lifecycle. And this is the core standard that we have built a certification product against. Great. Okay, so let's start off with quite a simplistic model of a CapEx life cycle of an asset, starting off with the brief, going through design, construction, in use, and then finally decommissioning. So looking at the relevant 1192 standard that goes against this life cycle. So we know that PAS 1192 Part 2 covers from brief all the way to handover stage. We then have PAS 1192 Part 3, which covers from the in-use phase or the handover phase to the decommission of the asset. We have BS 1192, which describes the common data environment, which I'll describe later on, as well as the standard methods and procedures that need to be implemented in managing the common data environment. We have BS 1192 Part 4, or COBE. So this is how you transfer structured information on maintainable assets. That's essentially an example of a scheme for transferring information. And then finally, we have PAS 1192 Part 5. So this is the information security Kitemark. So we can see from this diagram, so we've already launched 2 schemes against PAS 1192 Part 2, and we can tell from this image that the relevant standards for this scheme are Part 2, BS 1192, and BS 1192 Part 4. Now, for the asset management phase, or the in-use phase in this diagram, we see that the principal standard is PAS 1192 Part 3, but again, BS 1192 and BS 1192 Part 4 are both applicable. So therefore, these are the three standards that we look at when assessing against PAS 1192 Part 3 Kitemark. So the relationship with Part 2, so that's PAS 1192 Part 2. So there's effectively three routes that you could enter compliance with Part 3. So the first is just a brand new asset. So here we have big pardon. Here we have there's a new school that's been designed, and this is through using PAS 1192 Part 2. With that, the EIR is produced. The asset is constructed again using Part 2, and then from that, at the handover stage, PAS 1192 Part 3 is implemented. Now, a second scenario could be that an existing asset is being managed in compliance with Part 3. So I've put an example of a school here being managed, and that perhaps an extension to the school is required. So in this case, the extension of the school, which constitutes a major project, that would implement the requirement of PAS 1192 Part 2. But whilst that project is being carried out, the existing asset, the existing school, will be managed using Part 3. And then on the completion of the project, it would then come back to being fully implemented using Part 3. And then the final scenario is essentially an existing asset where you want to adopt PAS 1192 Part 3. Now, of course, the vast majority of assets that exist, well, they already exist. So this will probably be, well, this is most common, but you tend to see the specification of BIM at the first, that scenario 1. Great. So with that in mind, we see that the more realistic diagram of how the different 1192 standards relate to the life cycle are shown here, where you can potentially go around iteratively with each major work initiated. Excellent. Okay, so I think we're going to go back to Rob now for our first poll question.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Okay, so let's run the first poll question now, and that is to try and ascertain who's on the line today. So are you, and please do select all that apply, are you an asset owner? Are you an asset facilities manager in-house? Are you an asset facilities manager subcontractor? Or are you an asset designer / builder? Or do you have another role? So in terms of asset owners, we don't have any on the line at the minute, or indeed, for that matter of fact, asset or facilities managers who are in-house. But we do have asset facilities managers who are subcontractors, and we have 10% of you in the audience who've said that that's what you are. 40% say that you're asset designers and builders, and 50% of you say that you are involved in another role. So I'm just going to close that poll now and pass you back over to Gary.
Okay, so one of the common principles of BIM Level 2, or the key standards of 1192, are essentially, it's all about defining what information is required. So what level of information, what level of detail, how the information should be used, who's responsible for producing that information, in what format, what are the exchange mechanisms, when it's required, but crucially how it should be managed. So here we have the diagram of the principal documents within, or the output documents and outputs of PAS 1192 and PAS 1192 Part 3. So we start off with so the OIR. So the OIR is the equivalent to the PLQ, or the plain language questions that are part of PAS 1192 Part 2. So what the OIR describes are what are the key strategic objectives of an organization. An example might be I need to manage real-time energy consumption within my building. So there's, within the PAS itself, it describes a whole list of potential organizational information requirements, but this is essentially an open document or an open output that needs to be produced by an organization. So once this is produced at an organizational level, at the asset level, this specifies the AIR, which is the asset information requirements. So there's a lot more jargon to learn with part 3. So what the AIR is, and this is the equivalent to the EIR, the Employees Information Requirements within PAS 1192 Part 2. But this is a bespoke set. This is bespoke to the asset, and this specifies what information is required in order to meet one or more of the requirements within the OIR. So this is the asset information requirements, and then this specifies the asset AIM, or the asset information model. And I'll describe the asset information model in more detail in the next few slides, but this is essentially collectively all of the data and information that describes an asset. So this like with the PIM, or the project information model within part 2, the asset information model is all the information that's needed to maintain the assets. Okay, so the IMP, or the information management process. So this is collectively the management system that describes the production, the implementation, and the management of all of the requirements stated within these documents. So the IMP must contain the OIR production, the AIR definition, the AIM requirements, and we see here that this includes how the asset information model is created, how information is stored, how it's shared, how it's archived, how it's analyzed, and how it's reported. The linked enterprise system interface, so I'll talk about that later. So that's related to systems that communicate with your CDE. And then lastly, maintaining the asset information model through the use of the common data environment, or the CDE. So these are the key processes and outputs that are described within PAS 1192 Part 3. So if we go back to Rob now for our second poll question.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Okay, so our next poll question is, do you use BIM in asset management? And we're just going to launch that now. Please select the one that applies. You've got no plans to use it at the minute. Not yet, just learning about it. Or not yet, but we are planning to use it in the future. Or we use it to a limited extent right now. Or we use it as part of a fully integrated process. The results are there's no one on the line right now with no plans to use it. 45% of you said not yet, you're just learning about it, which is the majority. 36% of you said not yet, but we are planning to use it in the future. And 18% of you say that you use BIM and asset management to a limited extent. 0% of you say that you use it right now as part of a fully integrated process.
Excellent. Okay, that's interesting. I think that reflects my exposure in that I think the construction community, or the design and construction community, with respect to BIM level 2, are at a bit more of an advanced stage collectively. Now, of course, there are organisations or asset management organisations that are embracing BIM level 2, but I think in terms of numbers, it's more widely, the uptake is more widely adopted within the design and construction phase. So let's talk a little bit more about the asset information model, because that will be one of the key things we look at with respect to certification, which I'll come to later. But so essentially, all the data and information related to or required for the operational phase of an asset shall be contained or linked to the asset information model, or AIM. So effectively, it's a store of both data and information, and that will be a collection of models, drawings. It could be product data templates, and the idea is within the asset information model itself, you have all the information you need in order to maintain the assets. So this is one of the expressions used is the asset information model is effectively the digital twin of the physical assets, and we very much treat the AIM as an asset, so that we appreciate that it is itself an asset, and it has value as an asset, as does the physical asset. So how is the AIM set up. So what are the sources of information that can be generated from the AIM? So first of all, for any given asset, so there'll be the setup of the asset information model, and that information can come from existing systems, so existing systems that exist within the organization. It can come from a new build project. So as a result of a PAS 1192 Part 2 project. So that's where a project information model, or a PIM, is well, partly transferred into an asset information model. We have the collection of new and updated information from the physical asset itself. So this is as-built information and installation of new systems within the asset. And then we've got this recognizing or relabeling of existing data and information that the organization stores themselves. So once this is set up, and that you have this digital representation of the physical asset, from then the job is then to keep that asset information model up to date and ensure that there's always a correspondence between the physical asset and the digital assets. So the next thing I just want to talk about is the common data environments. This is the key principle defined in BS 1192, and so the CDE, or the common data environment, it's a procedure for managing the iterative development of information to achieve full coordination of the information from all the disciplines within the project and the asset management chain. So the idea is that information is trusted, that it's generated once and reused many times. So that's to reduce time and costs in generation and management of that information. And it's this single source of truth that describes it. So the way in which we've looked at the common data environment is we essentially look at three areas: so architecture, process, and functionality. So the architecture we're looking at, so what software is being used, how is information stored, so what's your server-based system, what's the process of setting up and managing the CDE, and then lastly, what's the functionality behind the CDE, so how is it being used in practice? And we look at all of these key areas. So we have I mean, you can see for yourself, so we have the access, the security, sharing, destruction. If you look across each of these three areas, architecture, process, and functionality, we look at all of these key aspects. CDE with relation to PAS 1192 Part 3. So the CDE that I described in the previous page, so that's taken from PAS 1192 Part 2. So what we have is, so the different inputs to the asset information model. So the first one was through the PIM. So that's through the, I put here through stage 2 design. So the CD is hosted by the architect for a new construction project. But I think what I'm trying to say in this project, in this page, sorry, is that the CDE can be, it can be collectively a group of softwares, but the CDs can also change from throughout the life cycle of the asset. So I put here, so in Reba Stage 2, for example, so in the design, so the CD is hosted by the architect for a new construction project. So that's where, so in this particular project, the architect will host the CDE. So when that progresses to Stage 4 to technical design, in this example, all the information is moved to the lead contractor's CDE, the structural design and build. So this is, from my experience, the most common scenario. And then we have Reba Stage 7, so the in-use phase. So at the end of the project, so at handover phase, when the PIM feeds into the asset information model, the CD is then hosted by the asset management organization. So here, and this diagram is taken from the standard itself. You can see how the CD within the asset management organization is fed from different sources. Great. So I just want to talk about linked enterprise systems in relationship to CDE. So the linked enterprise system is essentially a discrete system that provides an information or data creation or management function. So some examples here, we've got perhaps a system that provides accounting and financial planning, or a system that is condition monitoring. The idea here is that the CDE or the asset information model doesn't necessarily have to be stored within one place, within one software. It can be collectively branched off into these linked enterprise systems, and that you take this holistic view that the asset information model is contained across both the asset information model within the CD, but also there's information retained within these linked enterprise systems. And one of the things that we look at is how this information is transferred and verified across the CDE and the asset and the linked enterprise system. Okay, so one of the benefits of BAS 1192 Part 3, sorry, is that through classification of objects, so describing objects in a universal way, you can essentially create these trigger mechanisms. So what you can do is you can assign inspection and maintenance plans against given classifications of assets, and you can generate work orders from that, and that the on-site teams or the external contractors, they can retrieve the information directly from the asset information model. That's either through the CDE itself or through the linked enterprise systems. So that on site they have exactly what they need in order to carry out their job, and then they can potentially do live updates to that asset information model. So we continually keep this correspondence, this one-to-one correspondence between the physical assets and the digital assets. So if we move back to Rob for our third poll.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Okay, so our next poll is, what are your challenges right now? So please select one. Is it deciding what information you need to request or to provide? Is it the supply? So is it a lack of BIM adoption in asset management? Is your challenge assuring the level of detail of asset information models? Is your challenge about trust and ensuring the accuracy of asset information? Or do you have any other challenges at the minute? So the challenges that you've told us that you are seeing, 0% of you say it's deciding what information to request or to provide. 60% of you say it's the supply. It's basically the lack of BIM adoption in asset management. 10% of you say it's the assurance, the level of detail of asset information models. And 20% of you say it's about the ensuring the accuracy and you having trust in the accuracy of asset information, and 10% of you have said other challenges. Those are some interesting stats there, Gary. I'll just transfer this back over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, that's interesting. So that actually reflects the problem that there exists, albeit to a lesser extent, in the adoption of BAS 1192 Part 2, where we've seen that the tier ones are effectively spearheading the transition and providing support and training to their supply chains. Now, you just remember, there's an ever increasing adoption of BIM level 2. This trend isn't slowing down, so it's analogous to the adoption of of CAD from traditional drawing. So I see this problem over time becoming less and less of a problem, but it's doing so already in the design construction sector. But okay, great. So I just want to talk about this is actually quite relevant. So this is the a schematic of the supply chains at different phases of the asset. So generally, there's going to be two differences between our clients or organizations within your supply chain. Effectively, what information does the organization produce, and what are the management responsibilities? And this is respect to BIM level 2. So focusing in on asset management. So we appreciate that asset management is going to be collectively delivered by an extensive supply chain. So this supply chain is made up of different roles: tier one asset managers, subcontractors, service suppliers, etc. Therefore, the scope of the assessment, or one of the principal requirements we looked at, or we want to uphold in our certification product, is that our certification is relevant and applicable to all areas of the supply chain. So this directly affects the poll question we just had. So we want to provide assurance and a mechanism for supply chains to upskill and learn more about what they need to deliver in order to be compliant against BIM level 2. And then we go back again for another poll question to Rob.
Thanks a lot, Gary. The next question is, how significant is your challenge right now with BIM Asset Management? Is it not an issue? Does it cause some frustration and inconvenience? Does it require time, cost, or is it a people resource thing? Is it also a critical business issue? So please select the one that applies to you. How significant is your challenge? Now, at the minute, 25% of you say that it's not particularly an issue. 38% of you say that it is causing some frustration and inconvenience, and 25% of you say that it is requiring time, cost, and people. And 13% of you say that it is a critical business issue. Those are some very interesting results there, Gary.
Thanks, Rob. Yes. So, I mean, I think this reflects the fact that, of course, we know the benefits that adopting BIM can bring an organization, but of course, with that, there is a large upskilling across the whole sector that needs to take place. So that's regarding awareness at all levels of the organization, as well as the technical training of the doers, or the personnel that are actually delivering the BIM projects themselves. And of course, there's also a hardware and software investment that needs to take place. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so I've talked a bit about some of the contents of PAS 1192 Part 3. So I want to now talk about how we've developed our Kitemark scheme against this standard. Now, in the development of all of our BIM schemes, what we've tried to do is we've tried to be influenced by the key principles of BIM, in that we create our schemes collaboratively. So what we've effectively done is created a shaping group of stakeholders. I mean, this is actually how BSI standards create the standards themselves. So it's through groups that engage and discuss the nuances of the contents of all of our BS standards. So this started in 2015. So where we effectively had 4 organizations that come together, and we asked them what should our certification look like. So this was prior to our launch of our certification against Part 2. So I mean, first of all, we asked, is there a need for certification? So because what we want is we require there needs to be a need for a certification product. Otherwise, there's no point of its existence. So that's always the first question we ask, which nervously is are we needed? So from that, we created the scheme requirements for both our verification scheme against Part 2 as well as our Kitemark scheme against Part 2. Which were launched in December of 2015 and 2016 respectively. So since then, our shaping group has grown from 4 members to around 15 members now, and we effectively host the organizations at one of our BSI sites. And so we've conducted several shaping sessions on Part 3, and the 3 questions that we asked them were, what's the scope? What should the scope be of BS PAS 1192 Part 3 certification? So how should we treat ISO 9001? How should we treat ISO 55000? So that's on asset management. Secondly, we asked, what are the benefits of BSI PAS 1192 Part 3 certification? So what value would it give to you as the organization or the asset itself in gaining certification? And then finally, which is the the fun one, is so what are the practical requirements of certification? So what are the issues that are particularly sensitive, or how should, so when we turn up at your site, what should be the evidence we look for? What are the key things we look for? And I'll put an example here, LOI/LODs, that's level of information, so that's the amount of non-graphical information, and LOD, so level of detail. Any latency issues we have, so if there's an update latency between the asset information model against the physical asset, how should that be controlled? Should there be a minimum amount of information that's captured within the asset information model, irrespective of what the client is being asked for? So these are all questions we asked our shaping group. So the first, so this is all feedback directly from our shaping group. So all of these answers are from the group themselves. So the first thing we looked at is, what are the benefits to the asset owners themselves, and we have a whole list. But here's some examples of how the asset owners can benefit from certification. We've got increased value due to improved maintenance records with a full service history of the asset for future buyers. Reduced bid costs due to better information, reducing the costs for the clients. Protects the client, giving them confidence in asset data. Improved risk management, clarity of ownership. So this is an important issue for large asset owners. One of the issues is they don't actually realize what they have. And then, fundamentally, the increased asset intelligence and insights, and this is reflected in a publication by Ernst & Young that states, providing assurance for asset data helps increase buyer confidence. 44% of buyers say lack of confidence in information is the most significant factor to reduce the offer price or to walk away from the deal. So this shows the importance of the information behind the asset itself. So knowing what you have, knowing the condition of all your assets, knowing the value, how it's sourced, these are all things that need to be embedded within the asset information model. So we use this example of a full service history, this analogy, and so this is the idea that you have the right information, and that the information is being updated when it should have been. So this, by having a full service history, this increases the value of a used car, and we use the same analogy with a comprehensive and up-to-date asset information model with respect to the physical asset it represents. So not only it's important that the value is realized by the asset owner or the specifier, but it's also important that the asset manager receives the benefit. And again, here are some examples given to us by asset management organizations or organizations within the asset management supply chain of what benefits they would see through certification. And you can see here, so help bid for contracts, improve management of supply chain, increase client satisfaction, achieve Kitemark on asset information models to provide assurance and showcase projects for clients. So we'll talk about this shortly. And it also helps through the active certification, it helps embed the BIM process into an organization, because it allows you to benchmark where you are against other organizations. Not directly, of course, but you know that we're applying a common standard against every organization that we assess, and it can be used as a mechanism to help go through this transition period into adopting BIM level 2 processes. Okay, so one of the key decisions made from the shaping group is that not only can we award that we've decided that we can award a certification at an organizational level. So we issue a certificate to the organization, much like we've done with our Part 2 client certification. But what's unique with this certification scheme is that we can also issue a kite mark against the asset information model itself. Now you can see here, so in the green on the right hand side, so this is essentially where we're assessing the processes behind the creation of the OIR. Remember, that's the organizational information requirements, how that generates the asset information requirements, or the AIR, and how that is fed and an asset information model, or AIM, is produced from this. It looks at how linked enterprise systems are linked with the asset information model, or the CDE itself. And so the kite mark against the organization itself is very much aimed at key processes that are carried out, and I'll talk later about what we'd actually assess in order to achieve that. But what we can also do is certify the asset information model. So here what we can do is that if an organization is managing several assets in accordance to PAS 1192 Part 3, we can, as long as the organization has a kite mark against the organization, it can have a separate kite mark for each of these assets. So I mean, that could be used. That's where you can relate it directly to the asset. And this is key. This is where we want to increase the value of the physical asset itself. So there's this link between the two. So one kite mark against organization can generate many kite marks against individual assets. Okay, so a key aspect of what kite mark demonstrates is that, not only do you have the capability of managing projects through Part 3, and you are implementing this in practice, but crucially your clients are satisfied with that delivery. So this satisfaction is key. And what an organization must demonstrate is that essentially that you are being proactive on defining what your clients' expectations are. So how are they defining success in the project, or what they're looking for in the product within the asset management. And then you need to actively collect feedback to ensure that their expectations are being met, and that feedback is being managed, and that's done so with a continual improvement process. So this is effectively a 9001 clause, but what we're doing is we're expanding it into ensuring that it addresses BIM specific deliverables and outputs. So this is essentially an expansion of a 9001 requirement. So this is crucial. So this is a requirement that we had in our PAS 1192 Part 2 kite mark. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create this commonality between the kite marks for all of our BIM schemes, so that there's irrespective of whether it's Part 2 or Part 3 BIM certification that you have, that it represents the same fundamental principles. So the second key principle that goes beyond merely compliance with the standard is, and we recognise that collaboration is a vital component of a successfully delivered BIM project, and it's this component that requires a fundamental shift in the way projects are delivered and the way assets are managed. In addition to this, BIM is a new way of working, and we had that reflected in our poll question. So there's this mass learning, upskilling, as well as a financial and capital investment needs to take place across the whole sector. So as such, BSI Kitemark, what we want it to do is we want to promote this collaborative engagement across the whole supply chain. So there's a relevant standard, BS 11,000-1. So that's on collaborative working. So here, what we've done is and this was again an output of the shaping group, is that we're not saying that you need to be fully compliant to this standard, but we're using that as a framework to underpin our certification. And there's two key clauses here: value creation and working together within 11,000. And essentially, what we're looking for is that you proactively identify what are the benefits of working collaboratively, and how can you actively promote collaboration through your supply chain. And this realizes itself in essentially case studies that we look at. So some examples that we've seen are workshops that are carried out to supply chain members, or training on process or software, support, that's on-site or online support, software support, so that's technical support on how to use Revit functionality, for example, assessment feedback, or maybe publications, or case studies or guides that are published online. These are all activities that help spread the word of BIM, and we've been very impressed so far with the amount of collaboration that we've seen with our clients. Okay, so we got one more question now. So we go back to Rob.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Okay, so our final poll question is: tell us what help do you need with the most? Is it getting started with BIM Asset Management? Is it what standards to use or to specify to? Is it knowing what asset management data to provide or to request? Is it using assets information models, AIMS? Or is it how to assure and trust the quality of AIMS? And so it seems that 50% of you say that you need help getting started with BIM Asset Management. 25% of you say you need help with the standards to use or what to specify to. 38% of you say it's about knowing what asset management data to provide or to request. 13% of you say it's about using asset information models. And the biggest chunk, 63% of you have said it's about how to assure or trust the quality of AIMS. So those are some very interesting results.
Yeah, I mean that last point, how to assure quality. I mean that's what Kitemark is fundamentally trying to do. I mean with regards to understanding, so the next thing I want to describe, it relates to that. So now I wanted to describe, so what's the assessment that takes place. So so I've talked about the scope of the Kitemark. That's what we look at. So and how it's developed. Now I want to talk about, okay, when we turn up, what are we actually going to be looking at? How does the assessment take place? And essentially, a certification decision is based on the output of a stage 2 assessment. So that's the BSI terminology for the final assessment. So here I've put in the box some examples of the things that we look at. So the OIRs, the AIRs, project supply chain assessment, setting up and management of the asset information model, definition of triggers and their documentation. So we have a whole host of things that we look at, and one of the guidance documents that we provide to our clients is something we call the assessment matrix, and we've done that with our other schemes as well. And this is essentially a kind of a breakdown of exactly what we're looking for. So it will have the relevant clause within the standard and what BSI expects to see. So a really useful exercise is to go through this assessment matrix as a preparation tool for your final assessment, because this is essentially the blueprint of the assessment. So that's the first component, and then the second component is the asset information model assessment. So I talked about how we had two different certification products. We have the certification against the organization and the certification against assets. So in order to get certification against the organization, we still need to look at live asset information model management, but we'll do so in a using a sample-based approach, which is how we do all of our Kitemark schemes for physical assets. So we have a system of ensuring that the correct sampling is taking place, and then we have this optional strand that if you wanted to have a particular asset have its own Kitemark, then what we'd do is we'd look in detail at that one particular asset or that group of assets in its entirety, so in a non-sample base. So we go end to end, and then if that's successful, then we can award a certificate against the asset information model for that asset itself. So so we have a summary here. So on the left, you see that we have the organizational Kitemark, which can then spawn many asset information model Kitemarks. And on the right, we just have a quick summary of what are the key components of the Kitemark against asset management. So at the top, we have compliance with Part 3. We look for a set of documented processes that outline how Part 3 is carried out. We look at asset information model setup and management. We look at client satisfaction management, and I've put in brackets, there's a standard BS ISO 10004, which is all on client satisfaction. Again, you don't need to be compliant, you don't need to have certification against that standard, we just use that as the framework. Collaborative engagement with the supply chain, with alignment with BS 11000, and then finally that you have a 9001 or equivalent system. So these are the core ingredients that make up Kitemark. So this is what the Kitemark represents. So in terms of the assessment journey, from the last poll, one of the issues was understanding. Now, what we provide is we actually provide as a preliminary assessment for the stage 2, what we call a gap analysis visit. So here, this is where we essentially come in and do a one-day audit, and there's no passing or failing of the gap analysis, and it's fundamental activities, so making sure that you understand what the requirements are, you understand what BSI are looking for when we come to do the assessment, and what evidence we're looking for, crucially, that you understand your current state. So it's essentially a calibration exercise against where you are against where you need to be, and then finally some practical planning of how the stage 2 assessment will be carried out. What projects what assets will be assessing, who needs to be there, what's the plan for the day or the several days. So following the gap analysis visit, we move on to the stage 2. Now that duration between the gap and the stage 2, it could be weeks, it could be months. It all depends on the organization and essentially how the gap goes. So the stage 2. So I broke that out in previous slides, but essentially it's an on-site assessment looking at processes, systems, and people. Asset information model assessment, that's sample-based. Client satisfaction and collaborative engagement. Following that, if that's successful, you'll be issued your Kitemark certificate with the option to have a single asset information model assessment, which can generate its own certificate. And then what we do is we have, like all of our Kitemarks, we have annual assessments. So every year there'll be an ongoing assessment that checks on how Part 3 is still being adopted, looks at other projects using the sample-based technique, and we have every year you'll have BSI come to one or more of your sites to carry out an ongoing assessment. Okay, so it's got a couple more pages left. Just so I'm really pleased to announce that on the 26th of July, we launched our latest Kitemark scheme against PAS 1192 Part 3. So we had 3 organisations that that went through the pilot process, and these 3 organisations are all part of our Shaping Group community. So the first is Atkins, the second is NG. So NG, they manage a lot of power plants in Europe, amongst other things. And then finally, you have to forgive. There's no picture here because we are planning a presentation. The Roads and Transportation Authority in Dubai. So this is a government authority, huge asset owner within Dubai. So these are the 3 organisations that we've actually awarded certification to against Part 3. And just to touch on the fact that we definitely don't see the relationship ending at the certificate handover stage. So what we really try to do, or what one of the value adds of Kitemark, is that we heavily promote our clients, and that we engage with specification of Kitemark. So we can see examples here. So the top images on the left, that's a video we created for BAM Ireland. On the bottom left, we have BAM Construct UK and Skanska with a supply chain event. And then the image on the bottom right is that was our Kitemark against Part 3 launch. So we do extensive activities to increase the value and promote the fact that our clients have Kitemark certification. And then finally, my last slide, well, my second to last slide, should I say, is just a quick note about ISO 19650. So you'll probably be aware that there's a new ISO being written at the moment. So it was recently in this version or draft international standard and open for comments. So I'm aware that it's had many comments of its content. So that's been written at the moment. It's probably going to be published maybe early next year, but of course we're not sure, and that depends on the comments itself. But one of the on reviewing the draft version, at least, one of the encouraging points is that there's a strong focus on the customer, which reflects on our mirrors the client satisfaction of our Kitemark schemes, and there's a strong emphasis on collaborative engagement, which of course is another key component of our Kitemark scheme. So when the ISO transition happens, so essentially three key activities that will happen from our point of view. So BSI will conduct a gap analysis of the differences between the 1192 standards and the ISO. We will then communicate all of any additional requirements or any differences between the two to all of our client bases, and then there'll be a transition for certification. So over a period of time, we'll transfer certification against the 1192 standards to the ISO 19650. But this is something that BSI do a lot with other, with the countless other schemes that we manage. So it's a process that we're very good at. And then lastly, just our final slide, just to give you a sense of where we are with our BIM Level 2 certification suite. So we started off in December 2015 with our verification certification against Part 2. A year later, we launched our Kitemark against Part 2. So this is our so the verification is very much a compliance tool, primarily focused on Table 8 of PAS 91. So that's the condition of contract introduced last year. Whereas the Kitemark is very much a market differentiator. This is a premium product of ours. So this year we've launched a scheme, as I mentioned, on Asset Management Kitemark. We also launched a scheme on BIM Objects. There was a webinar earlier today on that. And then finally, so we are planning on launching our scheme against PAS 1192 Part 5. So that's information security later in the year. So once that's released, this will cover us for the whole BIM Level 2 landscape. So across these three schemes, we will cover all aspects of the asset lifecycle with respect to BIM Level 2. And of course, we have the ISO 19650 transition. Excellent. So that's that's me done. Um, I, I think we have maybe have a time for one or two questions. I know it's 3 o'clock now. I've slightly overrun, I'm afraid, but should we have a look to see if there's any questions?
Okay, Gary. So, yes, we do have a few questions which have come in. The first one is about, and I wouldn't pretend to understand what the acronym is, but it's about the CAFM system. And it's our CAFM system does not handle 3D models. Therefore, how can we be compliant with PAS 1192 Part 3?
Okay, yeah, that's a common question. So, compliance with PAS 1192 Part 3. So it doesn't mandate the use of 3D models with every asset that's being managed. The emphasis is on the management of the data and information on the asset. So the contents of the asset information model. So what is essential in compliance is that the requirements of the OIR, so that's the organizational information requirements, and the AIR, the asset information requirements, that they're being met. These specify, these two documents specify what data and information is needed for a specific asset and how it should be managed. So if a specific AIR requires management of a 3D model, then of course this must be carried out, but that's not always the case. So in a lot of cases, the AIR will not require a 3D model itself. I mean, of course, the vast majority of assets that exist don't have an associated 3D model. So there's going to be a transition if Part 3 is to be adopted against these assets. There's always going to be a transition, but to the because at the moment there is no current 3D model associated with it.
Thank you very much, Gary. So our next question is, it reads, only a small percentage of the assets that we manage are done in accordance with PAS 1192 Part 3. The majority of our assets are managed using processes that we established a long time ago. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, effectively, all new assets which have been specified to be BIM Level 2 compliant need to be managed in accordance with Part 3. So this is for all new building infrastructure projects that have Part Level 2, specification. So this is all centrally procured government assets. You will be able to manage your legacy portfolio of assets in a more efficient way in doing this. Yeah, I think this. I mean, this is an issue that is just a legacy issue, unfortunately. And I think if all new assets coming through the system are being implemented or are being managed using Part 3, hopefully we'll see a more case studies being produced. I think that's something that's missing. I think once asset owners realize the true benefit, financially, crucially, of applying PAS 1192 Part 3, I think, then you can look to transitioning these existing assets, because there is a considerable investment in taking an existing asset and making it BIM compliant.
Thank you very much, Gary. We've only got time for a couple more questions, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry about that. And one of them is, what plans do BSI have to increase awareness and demand for BIM with asset owners and asset management organizations? So I'll just transfer you back over.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is something I was talking about in one of my slides, in that specifier engagement. This is a key activity that we do in promoting our Kitemarks. What we want, we want the Kitemark to be recognised in terms of what it represents. So if an organisation is tendering for a contract, whether that's against Part 3 or if it's a project against Part 2, and that organisation has a Kitemark that the client understands what the Kitemark represents and understands what the value the Kitemark brings. So puts that that bidder in a more favorable position. So we are making considerable effort in essentially helping to upskill the specifiers, and we have a whole team based in that activity, and so through promotion of our certificate holders, as well as engaging with the specifiers, we really want to promote Kitemark. We want you know, because we will be promoting Kitemark, but we want our clients to promote the fact they have Kitemark certification as well, because we see it as a true value add to the tendering process.
Okay, so we have another question, which is about how do you become certified with BIM Asset Management?
Okay, yeah, so that's so I mean specifically it's what we've described, well, what I've described above, but it's essentially ensuring that you're actively delivering BIM projects. So we look for real evidence of projects, so live documents and CDEs that will be assessed, and we speak to the personnel that are involved in the delivery of the project. So what we don't want is that that an organisation who are aiming to achieve Kitemark, then I'm sure they'll have a number of BIM champions within the organisation, but in order for it to be really successfully delivered, it needs to be embedded throughout the organisation itself. So this is something that the Kitemark aims to help with.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Gary. I'm afraid we're going to have to take all the other questions that we've had submitted offline. So we will endeavor to respond back to you with regards to those under separate cover. So it just leaves me to start wrapping up the webinar right now. It goes without saying that we'd like to thank Gary and, of course, you, the audience, for joining us today. And we certainly hope that you've enjoyed the webinar. So thank you again. Thanks a lot, Gary. And we do hope to hear from you all very soon.